I was just a stand-in husband, hired to play a role for 5 years, but on the day my contract ended, I vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but a single tube of red paint on an empty floor, and now the woman who never really saw me has torn apart the city to find me, because she finally realized that the man she paid to love her was the only one who ever truly did. Before we dive into this incredible story, do not forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon button so you never miss our powerful, life-changing content. After 5 years as a stand-in husband, I left. Now my wife is desperate to find me. The rain fell in heavy, silver sheets against the tall windows of the penthouse that I stood there, watching the city lights blur into watercolors that my hand rested on the cold glass, and I could feel the faint vibration of the traffic far below. For 5 years, this had been my view. For 5 years, this had been my prison. And my salvation. That I turned away from the window and looked at the room behind me. It was immaculate, everything in its place, the designer furniture, the hush of the central heating, the faint scent of lilies from the vase on the console table. This was her world. A world of perfect, polished surfaces. A world I had been hired to maintain. My name is not important. What is important is the agreement I made with Eleanor's father 5 years ago. That he was a powerful man, a titan of industry, and he was dying. His daughter, Eleanor, was his whole universe. But she was fragile, heartbroken from a love that had shattered her. Her father could not bear to leave her alone, unprotected from the world and from her own grief. So, he came to me. That I was a struggling artist, drowning in debt, living in a studio that smelled of turpentine and despair. That he offered me a deal. That I would become Eleanor's husband, not a real husband, but a stand-in. A companion, a protector, a stable presence in her life. That I would live in her home, manage the small things, offer a shoulder if she needed it. In return, my debts would be cleared, and my mother, who was also ill, would receive the best medical care money could buy. I signed the contract without hesitation. For 5 years, I played my part. I walked a step behind her at gallery openings. I sat across from her at our long, silent dining table. I learned to anticipate her needs, to have her tea ready exactly as she liked it, to know when she wanted to be alone and when the silence was too heavy for her to bear. I became a ghost in her life, visible, yet not truly seen, and somewhere in that quiet, shadowed existence, I made a fatal mistake. I fell in love with her. It was not a dramatic, sweeping romance. It was a slow, creeping dawn. It was the way she would sometimes hum an old song, thinking I could not hear. It was the fierce, protective way she spoke to the gardeners about the roses she loved. It was the single, tear-filled night, 2 years ago, when she had too much wine and told me about the man who had broken her heart. She had cried, and I had held her hand. It was the first time she had ever truly touched me, and in that moment, my soul was no longer my own, but a contract is a contract, and I was just the stand-in. I was the man who filled a space, not the man who occupied a heart. So, when her father's final clause was fulfilled, when the 5 years were up, I knew it was time to go. I had to leave before the ghost began to believe he was real. I left no note. I took only my old clothes, my paints, and the memory of her humming in the garden. I went back to my small studio, to my life of turpentine and dreams. I did not know, as I stood at my own small, rain-streaked window that night, that across the city, a different scene was unfolding. I did not know that Eleanor had come home early from a trip. She must have called my name, expecting to hear my quiet reply from the library. She must have walked through the silent rooms, a growing unease tightening her chest. I imagine her standing in the middle of our living room, the one with the tall windows. The rain would have been the same, lashing against the glass, but the room would have felt different, colder, emptier. She would have noticed the small things first. My favorite coffee mug was missing from the kitchen. My worn leather gloves were not on the hall table. My books, the few I had brought with me, were gone from the shelf. She told me later that she went to my room. The door was slightly ajar, which was unusual. I always kept it closed. She pushed it open. The bed was made, but it was too perfect, too impersonal. The closet door was open, and it was empty. Not a single shirt, not a single pair of shoes. The silence in that room must have been deafening. She said the air felt still, like a room in a museum. It was the room of a man who had never been there. A stage set after the actors had left. She felt a shock so profound it rooted her to the spot. Her breath caught, not in her throat, but deep in her chest, a sharp, physical pain. She looked around, her eyes scanning desperately for any trace of me. And then she saw it. On the otherwise bare wooden floor, right next to the empty closet, was a small Crumpled tube of paint. It was cadmium red. My favorite color. It was the only thing I had forgotten. To her, it was a scream in the silence. It was proof that I was real, that the last 5 years were real. She picked it up, her fingers, usually so poised, trembled as they closed around the soft metal. She held it so tightly the tube split, and a tiny bead of red paint welled up. Like a drop of blood on her pristine white palm. She did not wipe it away, she just stared at it, and in that moment, the carefully constructed dam inside her broke. The realization did not just wash over her, it crashed into her with the force of a tidal wave. That I was not just the stand-in. That I was the man who brought her tea in silence. That I was the man who fixed the broken step on the garden path so she would not trip. That I was the man who listened to her cry. That I was the man who left her alone. She dropped the tube and ran from the room. She ran through the penthouse, her heels clicking a frantic, desperate rhythm on the marble floors. She grabbed her phone, her hands shaking so badly she could barely unlock it. She called my number. It rang and rang, eventually going to a voicemail box that was full. She called her father's old lawyer, the one who had arranged everything. That he was kind, but firm, the contract was fulfilled. My identity and whereabouts were protected by a non-disclosure agreement he could not break. She was desperate. A woman who had always had everything was now facing the one thing her money could not buy. She could not buy me back, she could not buy the quiet comfort of my presence. For the first time in her insulated life, Eleanor felt completely, utterly powerless. She felt the raw, grinding pain of a love realized only at the exact moment it was lost. She hired a private investigator, she combed through my old life, the life before her, she found my small, struggling art gallery, she found my mother's old house, now sold. She found nothing but echoes that I had vanished, not out of malice, but out of a promise, the promise I had made to her father to protect her, even from myself. Then, one day, a month later, she found a lead. A small gallery in a part of the city she had never visited was showing the work of an unknown artist. The artist's name was a pseudonym, but the gallery owner mentioned, in passing, that the painter had once been a private art restorer for a wealthy family. He had a meticulous eye for detail. The owner said that he could spend hours, days even, perfecting a single square inch of a canvas, trying to capture not just the image, but the feeling of a moment. Eleanor knew it was me. She stood outside the gallery for a long time. It was a cold, clear evening, the street was wet from an earlier rain, reflecting the headlights of passing cars like scattered jewels. She could see the warm light glowing from inside the gallery, she could see my paintings on the walls, and then, she saw me. That I was standing with my back to the window, talking to a couple. That I was wearing a simple gray sweater. My hair was a little longer. That I looked peaceful. She pushed the door open. That a small bell chimed. That I turned around, our eyes met across the room, the noise of the gallery, the chatter of the people, it all faded into a dull hum. That I saw her standing there, wrapped in an expensive coat, her face pale, her eyes holding a look I had never seen before. It was not the cool, composed gaze of Eleanor the heiress. It was the raw, terrified, hopeful look of a woman about to risk everything. She walked towards me, her steps slow and deliberate. She stopped right in front of me, so close I could smell her familiar perfume. She did not speak for a long moment, she just looked at me, her eyes searching my face. Then, she reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. She held it out to me on her open palm. It was the crumpled tube of cadmium red paint, the dried bead of red still on the side. You forgot this, she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. It was the only proof I had that you were ever really there. I looked from the tube to her face. I saw the pain there, the confusion, the desperate hope. Eleanor, I started, my own voice a stranger to me. I had to go. It was the agreement. I was just, do not say it, she interrupted, her voice stronger now. Do you stand in for a man who paints with his soul? She gestured to the canvases around us. Do you stand in for a man who fixes broken steps so I do not fall? Do you stand in for a man who held my hand when I cried? A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. I do not want the stand-in, she said, her voice breaking. I want the man who forgot his paint. I want you. The room was completely silent, everyone was watching, but I did not see them. I only saw her. I saw the wall around her heart, the one I had spent 5 years quietly trying to scale, finally, completely crumbled. I reached out and took the tube of paint from her hand. My fingers brushed against hers, and this time, it was not a ghostly touch. It was real. It was warm. I loved you, I confessed. The words finally free, I loved you almost from the beginning. And leaving was the hardest thing I have ever done. She let out a small, choked sob. Then why did you not tell me? Why did you just go? Because I made a promise to your father, I said gently. I promised to protect you. I thought leaving was protecting you from a complication, from a man who was only there because he was paid to be. She shook her head, a sad, wise smile touching her lips. My father, she said, was a very clever man. He knew I would never trust anyone who approached me on their own. He knew I was too hurt to see a genuine heart. So he did the only thing he could. He paid for one. He bought me time to heal, and he bought you a place by my side, hoping that in the quiet moments, the real thing would grow. I stood there, stunned by her wisdom. That I, in all my years of quiet devotion, I had never seen the full picture. That I had only seen the bars of my gilded cage. She had seen the gardener who was planting a forest. That I took her hand properly this time, intertwining my fingers with hers. The red paint from the tube was a small, warm smudge between our palms. I have nothing, I told her honestly. I have this gallery, for now. I have my paints. I have my freedom. But I do not have a penthouse. I do not have a trust fund. She laughed, a beautiful, watery sound that filled the gallery. Eli, she said, using a nickname she had never used before, I have spent 5 years living in a cold, perfect penthouse with a ghost. I would trade it all for one night in your tiny studio, listening to the rain and watching you paint. I looked into her eyes, searching for any hint of doubt, any flicker of the old, guarded Eleanor, but she was gone. That I, in her place, stood a woman stripped bare of pretense, vulnerable and strong all at once. The couple who had been looking at my paintings quietly slipped out of the gallery. The owner, a kind older woman named Margaret, who had believed in my work when no one else would, smiled at me from across the room and discreetly turned the sign on the door to "Closed." She dimmed the light slightly, giving us the gift of privacy. Eleanor did not seem to notice any of it, her eyes never left mine. You once told me, she whispered, that the most beautiful paintings are not the ones that are perfectly executed, but the ones where you can see the artist's struggle in every brushstroke. The ones where the paint is thick in some places and thin in others, where the artist made mistakes and painted over them, where the canvas itself bears the weight of the journey. I remembered that conversation. That it was late one night, 3 years ago. She had wandered into the small room I used as a study, unable to sleep. That I had been sketching, just a simple charcoal drawing of the city skyline. She had sat on the floor beside my chair, something she had never done before, and asked me about art. That I had talked for an hour, perhaps more, about everything I loved and believed about painting. She had listened without interrupting. When I finally stopped, embarrassed by my own passion, she had simply nodded and said, "That is how I want to live. Imperfectly. Authentically. With the struggle visible." Now, she took a step closer to me. "That is what these past 5 years have been," she said softly. "That is what I was too afraid to see. You were not a stand-in husband. You were the real thing, painted over with the thin veneer of a contract. And I was too busy looking at the surface to see the masterpiece underneath." I lifted my free hand and gently touched her face. She closed her eyes at the contact, leaning into my palm as if she had been starved for this simple touch for years. Perhaps she had, perhaps we both had. "I have nothing to offer you but myself," I said again, needing her to understand. "No promises of security. No grand gestures. Just a small life, honestly lived." She opened her eyes and looked at me with such fierce tenderness that my heart ached. "Eli, for 5 years you offered me yourself every single day. You offered me patience when I was cold. You offered me silence when I needed peace. You offered me your hand when I cried. You offered me your presence, steady and true, without ever asking for anything in return. Do you not see? That is everything. That is the only thing that has ever mattered." Behind us, Margaret cleared her throat gently. "I am so sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice warm with genuine happiness for us, "but I am closing up for the night. And I suspect you two have a great deal to talk about." Eleanor laughed, that same beautiful, watery laugh, and I felt something crack open in my chest. That it was the last piece of the wall I had built around my own heart, the wall I had constructed to protect myself from the pain of loving her without hope. That we walked out of the gallery together, hand in hand. The night air was cold and sharp, carrying the clean scent of wet pavement and the distant promise of more rain. Eleanor shivered slightly, and without thinking, I took off my jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. She looked at me with an expression I could not quite read. "You always did that," she said quietly. "Every time we walked from the car to a restaurant, every time we were outside. You would always find a way to shield me from the wind, to give me your jacket, to walk on the outside of the pavement. I noticed it. I noticed all of it. I just never knew how to say thank you. I never knew how to say that it made me feel safe." We stood on the pavement outside the gallery, the city moving around us in a blur of lights and sound, but we were in our own small bubble, isolated by the magnitude of what was happening between us. "Where do we go now?" she asked, and for the first time, I heard uncertainty in her voice, not the uncertainty of doubt, but the uncertainty of a new beginning. She was used to plans, to schedules, to knowing exactly what came next. Now, she was stepping into the unknown. That I thought for a moment. "My studio is not far," I said carefully. "It is very small. And it smells like turpentine." She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes and crinkled the corners. "I remember the smell," she said softly. "It used to linger on your clothes sometimes. I always liked it. It smelled like you. Like the real you, beneath the suit and the silence." We began to walk, slowly, without hurry, the city lights reflected in the puddles at our feet, creating 1,000 tiny mirrors. That Eleanor's hand was warm in mine, and I could feel her pulse beating against my palm, a rapid, nervous rhythm that matched my own. As we walked, she told me things. She told me about the month since I had left. She told me about the night she found the empty room, about the feeling of the world dropping away beneath her feet. She told me about the investigator, about the dead ends, about the growing despair that she would never find me. She told me about the moment she saw the gallery listing online, about the frantic cab ride across the city, about the terror that she would be too late, that I would be gone again. "I have never been so scared in my entire life," she admitted, her voice small. "Not when my first love left me. Not when my father died. Nothing compared to the thought of a world without you in it. Because with my first love, I lost someone who was wrong for me. With my father, I lost someone I loved deeply but had to let go. But losing you meant losing the person who had become my home. And I did not even realize you were my home until the door closed behind you." We stopped walking. That we were in front of an old building, the kind with fire escapes zigzagging down the front and mismatched windows reflecting the streetlight. "My building, my home. This is it," I said, suddenly nervous. "It is not what you are used to." She squeezed my hand. "Eli, for 5 years I lived in a museum. Beautiful, perfect, and utterly lifeless. I want to live somewhere real. I want to live where the paint is thick in some places and thin in others. I want to live where the struggle is visible." I led her up the narrow stairs, my heart pounding with each step. The hallway smelled of other people's cooking and old wood. A cat darted past us, disappearing into the shadows. Eleanor did not flinch, she simply held my hand tighter. I unlocked the door to my studio and pushed it open, suddenly seeing it through her eyes. It was one large room with tall windows that faced east, catching the morning light. Canvases leaned against every wall, some finished, some barely begun. My easel stood in the center, a half-completed painting of a garden scene resting on it. Tubes of paint littered the table nearby, along with brushes soaking in jars of murky liquid. The bed was in the corner, simply made with a worn quilt. A small kitchenette held a hot plate and a tiny refrigerator. The whole place smelled of turpentine and oil paint and coffee. Eleanor walked slowly through the room, her eyes taking in everything. She stopped in front of the easel and gasped softly. The painting was of her garden, the one at the penthouse, the one with the roses she loved. I had painted it from memory, pouring every ounce of my longing into every petal, every leaf, every shadow. "You painted my garden," she whispered. "I painted what I missed most," I admitted. "I painted what reminded me of you." She turned to face me, and the tears were flowing freely now, unchecked and unashamed. You loved me, she said, not a question but a statement of wonder. All that time, you truly loved me. All that time, I confirmed. And I will love you for all the time that is left. If you will let me. She crossed the room in 3 quick steps and threw her arms around my neck that I held her tightly, feeling the warmth of her body against mine, feeling the rapid beat of her heart, feeling the softness of her hair against my cheek. That it was the first time we had ever truly embraced, after 5 years of careful distance, of measured space, of almost touching, we were finally holding each other. I am never letting you go again, she murmured into my shoulder. You are never allowed to disappear. Not ever. Not for any reason. Not for my father, not for a contract, not for anything. Never again, I promised. I am exactly where I belong. We stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, the city humming outside the windows, the smell of turpentine surrounding us like incense. When we finally pulled apart, she looked around the studio with new eyes. It is perfect, she said firmly. It is absolutely perfect. It is small, I pointed out. It is cozy, she corrected. It is messy, I tried again. It is creative, she countered with a smile. It does not have a doorman or a gym or a concierge. It has you, she said simply. That is the only amenity I require. I laughed, a real laugh, and she joined in. We were both giddy with the relief of finding each other, with the miracle of confessed love returned. Later, we sat on the floor with our backs against the bed, sharing a simple meal of bread and cheese and wine from the small shop down the street. Eleanor told me about her plans. She wanted to sell the penthouse, she wanted to start a foundation in her father's name, supporting young artists. She wanted to learn to paint, even if she had no talent, just to understand my world better. She wanted to travel, to see the places that inspired the great masters. She wanted to do all of it with me. That I listened to her talk, watching the way her face animated when she spoke of the future, and I felt a peace I had never known. For 5 years, I had been a ghost in her life, present but unseen. Now, I was solid, that I was real, that I was hers. The rain began again. A soft patter against the windows. Eleanor leaned her head against my shoulder and sighed contentedly. I used to hate the rain, she confessed. It felt like the world was crying. And now? I asked. She tilted her head up to look at me, her eyes soft and warm. Now it sounds like the world is washing everything clean. Like we get to start over. I kissed her then, gently, reverently, the way one kisses something precious and long. Desired. That it was our first real kiss, and it held all the words we had never said, all the touches we had never shared, all the years of quiet longing finally given voice. When we finally broke apart, she was smiling. I have waited 5 years for that kiss, she whispered. I have waited 5 years to give it, I replied. The night stretched on, filled with conversation and laughter and the simple joy of being together without pretense. That we talked until our voices grew hoarse and our eyes grew heavy. When sleep finally claimed us, we were still holding hands, curled together on the narrow bed in my small studio, 2 people who had found their way home at last. Morning came softly, the gray light filtering through the windows and painting everything in shades of silver. That I woke first, as I always did, and for a moment, I forgot that everything had changed. That I looked at the empty space beside me, expecting nothing, and then I saw her. Eleanor was asleep on her side, her face peaceful, her hair spread across my pillow. She was real, she was here, she was mine. That I watched her sleep for a long time, marveling at the curve of her cheek, the flutter of her eyelashes, the soft sound of her breathing. That in sleep, she looked younger, softer, stripped of the armor she had worn for so long. This was the Eleanor I had always loved, the one hidden beneath the arras, the one who hummed old songs and cried over lost love and tended her roses with gentle hands. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, she looked disoriented. Then she saw me, and a slow, radiant smile spread across her face. Good morning, she murmured, her voice husky with sleep. Good morning, I replied. Did you sleep well? Better than I have in years, she admitted. I think I finally understand why. I was not sleeping alone. I was sleeping without you. There is a difference. We lay there for a while, talking quietly, planning the day. She wanted to see more of my neighborhood, she wanted to meet Margaret, to thank her for giving me a chance, she wanted to call her lawyer, to begin the process of disentangling herself from the life that had kept her isolated for so long, and she wanted breakfast, specifically, she wanted the kind of breakfast she had never had, greasy diner breakfast, with pancakes and eggs and bacon and coffee that came in a thick mug that I took her to a small diner 3 blocks away, a place with cracked vinyl booths and a jukebox that had not worked in decades. The waitress, a woman named Dottie who had known me for years, looked at Eleanor in her expensive clothes and raised an eyebrow. "Bringing in some fancy company, Eli?" she asked with a grin. "The fanciest," I agreed, and Eleanor beamed that we ate pancakes and drank coffee and talked about nothing and everything. Halfway through breakfast, Eleanor's phone rang. She looked at the screen and her expression shifted. "It is my lawyer," she said. "I should take this." She stepped outside, and I watched her through the window, pacing on the pavement, her free hand gesturing as she talked. When she came back in, her face was thoughtful. "That was interesting," she said slowly, sitting back down. "My father's lawyers have been trying to reach me for weeks. It seems there was another part of his will that no one knew about. A part that only activates when certain conditions are met." I waited, sensing this was important. She reached across the table and took my hand. "He left something for you, Eli." "For me?" She nodded. "A small trust. Nothing enormous, but enough. Enough to buy this diner if you wanted to. Enough to never have to worry about selling your paintings again. He left a letter too, to be delivered to you personally. The lawyers have been trying to find you for months." I sat back, stunned that Eleanor's father, the man who had hired me, who had seen me only as a solution to a problem, had left me money. "He knew," Eleanor said softly, reading my expression. "He knew that if I was smart enough, brave enough, to find you after the 5 years were up, then you were the one. He wanted to make sure we could build a life together without the shadow of that original contract. He wanted to give us a true beginning." I thought about the old man, dying in his hospital bed, making arrangements for a daughter he loved more than anything, that he had not just hired a stand-in, that he had placed a bet on love, and 5 years later, that bet was paying off. "What did the letter say?" I asked, my voice rough. Eleanor squeezed my hand. "I have not opened it. It is addressed to you. We can read it together, later. But I think it is his way of saying thank you. His way of telling you that he always hoped this would happen. His way of giving us his blessing." We sat in the diner, surrounded by the clatter of plates and the smell of bacon, and I felt tears prick at my eyes, not tears of sadness, tears of gratitude, for the old man who had seen something in me, for the woman who had crossed a city to find me, for the strange, winding path that had led us here. That afternoon, we sat in my studio and opened the letter together. It was written in a shaky hand, the handwriting of a man who knew his time was short. The letter was written on thick, cream-colored paper, the kind that spoke of old money and tradition. Eleanor handed it to me with trembling fingers, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on us both. That I unfolded it carefully, aware that I was holding the last words of a man who had changed my life forever. The ink was slightly smudged in places, as if he had paused often, gathering strength to continue. "To the man who will read this letter," it began. "If you are reading this, then my daughter has found you. And if she has found you, it means she finally woke up. It means she finally saw what I saw 5 years ago, when I sat across from a struggling artist in a small coffee shop and offered him a deal that would change everything." I felt Eleanor move closer, her shoulder pressing against mine, her eyes reading along with me. "You probably think I chose you because you were desperate. Because you needed money. Because you would agree to anything. You would be wrong. I chose you because of your eyes." I frowned, confused. Why eyes? I have spent my entire life reading people. It is how I built my empire. I look into their eyes, and I see what they try to hide. When I met you, I expected to see greed. I expected to see calculation. Instead, I saw kindness. I saw patience. I saw a man who would sit in the background and ask for nothing, simply because that was his nature. I saw a man capable of the kind of quiet, enduring love that my daughter desperately needed. Eleanor made a small sound beside me, a mixture of surprise and understanding. I knew Eleanor would not accept love if it was offered directly. Her heart was too broken, too scarred by that fool who left her. So I did the only thing I could. I bought her time. I bought her a companion. And I prayed that in the years of silence and proximity, the real thing would grow. The letter continued, and I could almost hear the old man's voice in my head, gruff and direct. I watched you for 5 years. Through reports. Through the occasional photograph. Through the updates my lawyers provided. I watched you fix the step on her garden path. I watched you learn her tea preferences. I watched you sit with her in silence when she needed company but could not ask for it. I watched you love her, quietly, without expectation, without demand. My hands shook slightly. He had known, all that time, he had known. And now, if you are reading this, she has finally seen it too. She has finally opened her eyes. So I am leaving you something. It is not payment for services rendered. It is not a reward for a job well done. It is a gift from a father to the man who will love his daughter the way she deserves to be loved. Use it to build a life together. Use it to create the kind of love story I had with her mother, before she was taken from me. The next line was written more slowly, the ink darker where the pen had paused. Take care of my little girl. She is stronger than she knows, but she is also more fragile than she shows. She needs someone who will stand firm when she wobbles. She needs someone who will hold her hand in the dark. She needs someone who will love her not despite her imperfections, but because of them. I believe, with all my heart, that you are that someone. I had to stop reading for a moment, the tears were falling now, and I did not try to hide them. Eleanor was crying too, her face pressed against my shoulder. One more thing, the letter concluded. The first time Eleanor brought you to meet me, I noticed something. When she left the room to get tea, you looked at the photograph of her mother on the mantel. You looked at it for a long time. And then you straightened it. It was slightly crooked, and you straightened it without being asked, without being thanked, without anyone even noticing. That was the moment I knew I had chosen correctly. A man who straightens a crooked photograph when no one is watching is a man of true character. Go and straighten the crooked things in her life, son. Go and love her the way she deserves. And if there is an afterlife, know that her mother and I will be watching, and we will be proud. The signature was simple. George Whitmore. I folded the letter carefully, reverently, and set it on the table beside us. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rain had started again outside, a gentle rhythm against the windows. Finally, Eleanor lifted her head and looked at me. Her eyes were red, her cheeks wet, but she was smiling. He knew, she whispered. All along, he knew. He knew everything, I agreed. He saw everything. She reached up and touched my face, her fingers tracing the line of my jaw. You straightened a photograph when no one was watching. It was crooked, I said simply. It would have bothered me. She laughed, a soft, wondering sound. That is who you are. That is who you have always been. You see the crooked things, and you straighten them. Quietly. Without needing thanks. Without needing anyone to notice. I turned my head and kissed her palm. I noticed one crooked thing I could not straighten, I admitted. Your heart. It was broken when I met you. And no matter how much I wanted to, I could not fix it. I could only wait. I could only be there. I could only hope that time would do what I could not. She took my hand and pressed it against her chest, over her heart. Feel that, she said softly. It beats steady now. It beats strong. It beats for you. You did not break in and force it to heal. You stood guard while it healed itself. That is so much harder. That is so much more beautiful. We stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other and in the strange, perfect gift of George Whitmore's final words. The weeks that followed were unlike anything I had ever known. Eleanor sold the penthouse, she donated most of her designer clothes and filled my small closet with simple things. She came to my studio every day, sometimes painting beside me, sometimes just reading on the bed while I worked. She learned to make coffee on my hot plate, though it was terrible, and we drank it anyway, laughing at the bitterness. Margaret hired her to help run the gallery, and Eleanor discovered a talent for connecting artists with collectors. She was warm and genuine in a way she had never been allowed to be in her old life. People responded to her, they trusted her. She was finally becoming the person she had always been. Underneath the armor point one evening, we were walking home from the gallery when she stopped suddenly. "There," she said, pointing. That I followed her gaze and saw a small storefront with a "For Rent" sign in the window. It was on a quiet street, lined with trees and small shops. "It is perfect," she said. "What is perfect?" She turned to me, her eyes bright with excitement. "A gallery. Our gallery. Not Margaret's, though we will always love her. Our own space. Your paintings. The artists you believe in. My organizing. My connecting. Together." I looked at the storefront and felt something shift inside me. For years, I had painted in solitude, never quite believing I deserved to be seen. For years, I had hidden in the background, never quite believing I deserved to be loved. But here was this woman, this extraordinary woman, asking me to step into the light with her. "We could call it the crooked photograph," I said slowly, testing the idea. She stared at me for a moment, and then her face broke into the most beautiful smile I had ever seen. "The crooked photograph," she repeated. "A gallery for art that shows the struggle. For artists who straighten the crooked things in the world. For people who need to know that someone notices when they straighten a photograph," I added softly. She threw her arms around me right there on the pavement, not caring who saw. "We are going to do this," she said fiercely. "We are going to build something beautiful together." "We already have," I whispered into her hair. "We already have." The months of renovation were chaotic and wonderful. Eleanor proved to have a fierce practical streak I had never seen. She negotiated with contractors, argued with suppliers, and personally painted the walls a warm, welcoming white. That I built the frames for the artwork, constructed the display stands, and painted a mural on the back wall. It was a garden scene, her garden, the one with the roses she loved. When she saw it, she cried. The night before our grand opening, we sat on the floor of the empty gallery, surrounded by paintings waiting to be hung. The space smelled of fresh paint and sawdust and possibility. Eleanor leaned against me, tired but happy. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "Terrified," I admitted. "What if no one comes? What if they hate the art? What if we fail?" She tilted her head to look at me. "Then we fail together. And we try something else. Together." I looked around the gallery, at the walls we had painted, at the frames I had built, at the mural that held her garden forever. "This is already more than I ever dreamed of," I said quietly. "A few years ago, I was alone in a tiny studio, painting pictures no one would ever see. Now I have you. Now I have this. Now I have a future." She smiled, that warm, real smile that was only for me. "And I have someone who straightens crooked photographs. Someone who loved me in silence for 5 years. Someone who never gave up, even when I was too blind to see." The grand opening was a success. Margaret came, and Dottie from the diner, and a surprising number of collectors who remembered Eleanor from her old life. They came because of her name, but they stayed because of the art paintings, yes, but also the work of other artists we had discovered, young artists, struggling artists. Artists who painted their struggles onto canvas for the world to see. A journalist came and wrote a piece about us. "The Crooked Photograph, a gallery built on love and second chances." The headline read. Eleanor clipped it and framed it and hung it behind the small desk where she did the books. Life settled into a rhythm. Mornings at the studio, coffee on the hot plate, terrible but ours. Days at the gallery, meeting artists, greeting collectors, building something brick by brick. Evenings walking home through the tree-lined streets, hand in hand. Nights curled together in the narrow bed, listening to the rain. One night, months after we opened the gallery, Eleanor woke me in the darkness. "Eli, she whispered. Wake up. I need to tell you something. I blinked, confused, reaching for her in the dark. What is wrong? Nothing is wrong, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Everything is right. So right that I need to tell you something. I sat up, suddenly awake. She took my hands in hers. I have been thinking about my father's letter, she said slowly. About what he wrote. About how he saw you straighten that photograph. About how he knew, even then, that you were the one. I waited, sensing there was more. And I have been thinking about us, she continued. About the 5 years of silence. About the month of searching. About all the time we wasted because I was too afraid to see. She took a deep breath. I do not want to waste any more time, Eli. I do not want to wait for the perfect moment, because there is no such thing. I want to marry you. Not because of a contract. Not because of my father's money. Not because it makes sense. Because I love you. Because you are my home. Because I want to spend the rest of my life straightening crooked things with you. I could not speak, the words would not come, that I could only pull her close and hold her, feeling her heart beat against mine, feeling the rightness of it all. Is that a yes? She whispered, laughing a little. That I finally found my voice. That is a yes, I managed. That is 1,000 times yes. That is a yes that has been waiting 5 years to be spoken. We were married 6 weeks later, in the garden at the old penthouse before Eleanor sold it. Her roses were in full bloom, filling the air with their scent. Margaret was there, and Dottie, and the artists from the gallery. George Whitmore's lawyer came, the one who had tried to find me, and he cried when he read the vows we wrote. My vows were simple. I have spent 5 years learning to love you in silence. I will spend the rest of my life loving you out loud. Eleanor's vows made everyone laugh and cry at once. I spent 5 years not seeing the man right in front of me. I will spend the rest of my life never taking my eyes off you. We danced under the stars, on the terrace where I had so often stood alone, watching the city lights. Now, I was not alone, that I was holding my wife, my partner, my home. The years that followed were not without struggle. The gallery had slow months that we argued sometimes, about small things, about art and money, and whose turn it was to make the terrible coffee, but we always came back to each other, always found our way home. Eleanor's foundation grew, supporting young artists who could not otherwise afford to pursue their dreams. She traveled to find them, to encourage them, to tell them the story of a struggling painter who had once been saved by a contract and a crooked photograph. She told our story often, not for fame, but for hope. She wanted people to know that love could grow in the strangest places. She wanted people to know that it was never too late to open your eyes. That I painted, more than I ever had. The gallery showed my work, and people bought it, not because of Eleanor's name, but because of what they saw in the brushstrokes. They saw struggle and triumph, they saw patience and love. They saw a man who had learned to paint not just images, but feelings. One evening, many years later, we sat in the garden of a small house we had bought together. It was not a penthouse. It was a modest house with a yard where Eleanor could grow her roses and I could paint in a studio built from the old trust her father had left me. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Eleanor was reading on the porch, her glasses perched on her nose, her hair streaked with gray. I was working on a painting of the garden, trying to capture the way the light fell on her roses. Our dog, a scruffy rescue we had named Crook, slept at my feet. Eli, Eleanor called softly. I looked up. She was holding a letter, the paper yellowed with AGE. It was her father's letter, the one we had read so many times. Do you remember what he wrote? About straightening the crooked things? I smiled. Every word. She set the letter down and came to stand beside me, looking at my painting. You are still doing it, she said softly. Still straightening crooked things. Look at this garden. Look at this life. Look at us. We were so crooked when we started. So broken. So lost. I reached up and took her hand. And look at us now. She leaned down and kissed my forehead. Happy anniversary, my love. I had almost forgotten that it was the day we met, all those years ago in a small coffee shop, when a desperate artist agreed to a strange contract. That it was the day that changed everything. Happy anniversary, I replied. To the woman who found me. To the man who waited, she answered. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the garden grew soft and dim. Crook stretched and yawned, the first stars appeared overhead, and we sat together, two people who had learned that love was not about grand gestures or perfect moments. That it was about staying, that it was about waiting, that it was about straightening the crooked things, quietly, without needing anyone to notice. The gallery thrived. That it became a gathering place for artists and dreamers, for people who believed that art could heal and love could transform. Eleanor and I grew old together, our hair turning gray, our steps slowing, our love deepening with each passing year. That we never had children of our own, but we had something just as precious. That we had each other. That we had the artists who became like family. That we had the students Eleanor's foundation supported, who wrote us letters and sent us photographs of their own galleries, their own successes. That we had a life built not on contracts or obligations, but on choice. Every day, we chose each other. Every day, we chose love. On the last night of Eleanor's life, many decades after that first meeting, we sat together in our garden. She was frail now, tired, but her eyes were still bright, still full of the woman who had crossed a city to find me. Eli, she whispered. I am here, I said, holding her hand. I am right here. She smiled, that same smile from the gallery all those years ago. Thank you for waiting for me. Thank you for finding me. She closed her eyes, and I felt her hand relax in mine, but she was not gone, not really. She was in every painting I had ever made of her garden, she was in every artist who found their way to the gallery, she was in every crooked thing I had straightened, every quiet moment of love that I lived. Another 5 years after Eleanor died, that I painted every day, filling canvas after canvas with memories of our life together. That I walked through the garden and talked to her roses, telling them stories she would have loved. That I sat on the porch with Crook the second, a scruffy dog who looked just like the first, and I watched the sun set over the flowers she had planted. When my own time came, I was at peace. That I had lived a life I never could have imagined. That I had loved a woman I never deserved. That I had built something beautiful from the ashes of a contract. The last thing I saw was the photograph on my bedside table. That it was Eleanor, young and radiant, standing in front of the gallery on our opening night. That it was slightly crooked. That I smiled, and I did not straighten it. That I left it for someone else to notice. That I left it as a reminder that love is not about perfection. That it is about seeing the crooked things and loving them anyway. That I closed my eyes, and I was not afraid. That I was not alone. That I was walking through a garden, and the roses were in full bloom. That in the distance, I could see a figure waiting for me, her silhouette familiar and beloved. Eleanor, she turned as I approached, and her smile was the same as it had always been, warm, real, mine. You took your time, she said softly. I had a few more paintings to finish, I replied. She laughed, that beautiful, watery laugh, and held out her hand. That I took it, and we walked together through the garden, toward whatever came next. Back in the world we left behind, the gallery continued. Our artists, now established and successful, took turns running it. They told our story to everyone who walked through the doors. They showed the new visitors the mural I had painted, the garden scene that covered the entire back wall. They pointed out the small detail in the corner, barely visible unless you looked closely. A man and a woman, sitting together on a bench, their hands intertwined, and above them, a single star, painted in cadmium red. The house stood empty for a while, until a young artist from Eleanor's foundation asked if she could live there. She was struggling, she said. She needed a quiet place to work, she needed to believe that someone believed in her. We would have said yes. We did say yes. Through the letter our lawyer delivered, the letter said simply, this house was built on love. May it be a home for yours. Straighten the crooked things. Plant roses. Paint every day. And when you find someone who sees you, really sees you, hold on tight and never let go. The young artist cried when she read it. Then she planted roses, then she painted, and one day, years later, she brought someone home to meet her. A quiet man who fixed the broken step on the garden path without being asked. A man who straightened the photographs on the mantel when no one was watching. A man who loved her in silence, waiting for her to see. She saw. Of course she saw. She had been taught to see by the story of two people who had waited a lifetime for each other. The cycle continued. Love. Finding love, painting finding painting, crooked things finding their straightening, and somewhere, in a garden beyond time, Eleanor and I watched it all, that we held hands and smiled, that we remembered the rain on the penthouse windows, that we remembered the small tube of red paint on an empty floor, that we remembered the gallery and the diner and the terrible coffee. Look, Eleanor said softly, pointing. That I looked. Down below, in the garden of our old house, the young artist was dancing with her quiet man, the roses were blooming, the stars were coming out, and on the mantel, just visible through the window, a photograph sat perfectly straight. That I smiled and squeezed Eleanor's hand. Someone is watching, I said. Someone is always watching, she replied. Someone is always straightening the crooked things. We turned away from the window and walked deeper into the garden. The path stretched before us, lined with flowers we had planted in life and flowers we had only dreamed of. In the distance, there was a small studio, its windows glowing with warm light. Inside, canvases waited. Inside, new paintings waited to be born. Do you want to paint? Eleanor asked. I want to paint you, I said. Again. Always. Forever. Every day for all of eternity. She laughed and pulled me toward the studio. Then we had better get started. The door opened, and light spilled out, warm and golden. That we stepped inside together. The smell of turpentine filled the air, brushes waited in jars, canvases stood ready, and on the easel, in the center of the room, a painting waited. That it was not finished. That it was a garden, our garden, with roses and a bench and two figures in the distance, but there was something new, above the figures, in the sky. Two stars now burned bright, cadmium red, burning together, forever. That I picked up a brush and handed one to Eleanor. She looked at it, then at me. I do not know how to paint, she said. You know how to love, I replied. That is the only thing that matters. We stood together before the canvas, the light glowed around us, the stars burned overhead, and we painted, not with oil and pigment, with memory and hope, with every crooked thing we had straightened, with every quiet moment of love. The painting grew. It spread beyond the canvas, beyond the studio, beyond the garden. It became everything. It became everywhere. It became the story of two people who found each other in the strangest way, who loved each other in the quietest way, who built something beautiful from the simplest materials. And somewhere, in a small gallery on a tree-lined street, a young couple stood before a mural. They held hands and looked at the detail in the corner, the man and woman on the bench, the single star above them, the cadmium red. Do you see that? The young woman whispered. I see it, the young man replied. It looks like two stars now, she said. I thought it was always one. They looked closer. In the painting, above the bench, two stars burned side by side, cadmium red, burning together. The young woman felt tears in her eyes. She did not know why, she only knew that the painting was beautiful, and that the man beside her was holding her hand, and that somewhere, somehow, love was real. Back in the world we left behind, the gallery continued. Our artists, now established and successful, took turns running it. They told our story to everyone who walked through the doors. They showed the new visitors the mural I had painted, the garden scene that covered the entire back wall. They pointed out the small detail in the corner, barely visible unless you looked closely. A man and a woman, sitting together on a bench, their hands intertwined, and above them, a single star, painted in cadmium red. The house stood empty for a while, until a young artist from Eleanor's foundation asked if she could live there. She was struggling, she said. She needed a quiet place to work, she needed to believe that someone believed in her. We would have said yes. We did say yes. Through the letter our lawyer delivered, the letter said simply, this house was built on love. May it be a home for yours. Straighten the crooked things. Plant roses. Paint every day. And when you find someone who sees you, really sees you, hold on tight and never let go. The young artist cried when she read it, then she planted roses, then she painted, and one day, years later, she brought someone home to meet her. A quiet man who fixed the broken step on the garden path without being asked. A man who straightened the photographs on the mantel when no one was watching. A man who loved her in silence, waiting for her to see. She saw. Of course she saw. She had been taught to see by the story of two people who had waited a lifetime for each other. The cycle continued. Love. Finding love, painting finding painting, crooked things finding their straightening, and somewhere, in a garden beyond time, Eleanor and I watched it all, that we held hands and smiled, that we remembered the rain on the penthouse windows, that we remembered the small tube of red paint on an empty floor, that we remembered the gallery and the diner and the terrible coffee. "Look," Eleanor said softly, pointing. That I looked. Down below, in the garden of our old house, the young artist was dancing with her quiet man, the roses were blooming, the stars were coming out, and on the mantel, just visible through the window, a photograph sat perfectly straight. That I smiled and squeezed Eleanor's hand. "Someone is watching," I said. "Someone is always watching," she replied. "Someone is always straightening the crooked things." We turned away from the window and walked deeper into the garden. The path stretched before us, lined with flowers we had planted in life and flowers we had only dreamed of. In the distance, there was a small studio, its windows glowing with warm light. Inside, canvases waited. Inside, new paintings waited to be born. "Do you want to paint?" Eleanor asked. "I want to paint you," I said. "Again?" "Always. Forever. Every day for all of eternity." She laughed and pulled me toward the studio. "Then we had better get started." The door opened, and light spilled out, warm and golden. That we stepped inside together. The smell of turpentine filled the air, brushes waited in jars, canvases stood ready, and on the easel, in the center of the room, a painting waited. That it was not finished. That it was a garden, our garden, with roses and a bench and two figures in the distance, but there was something new. Above the figures, in the sky, two stars now burned bright, cadmium red, burning together, forever. That I picked up a brush and handed one to Eleanor. She looked at it, then at me. "I do not know how to paint," she said. "You know how to love," I replied. "That is the only thing that matters." We stood together before the canvas, the light glowed around us, the stars burned overhead, and we painted, not with oil and pigment, with memory and hope, with every crooked thing we had straightened, with every quiet moment of love. The painting grew. It spread beyond the canvas, beyond the studio, beyond the garden. It became everything. It became everywhere. It became the story of two people who found each other in the strangest way, who loved each other in the quietest way, who built something beautiful from the simplest materials. And somewhere, in a small gallery on a tree-lined street, a young couple stood before a mural. They held hands and looked at the detail in the corner, the man and woman on the bench, the single star above them, the cadmium red. "Do you see that?" the young woman whispered. "I see it," the young man replied. "It looks like two stars now," she said. "I thought it was always one." They looked closer. In the painting, above the bench, two stars burned side by side, cadmium red, burning together. The young woman felt tears in her eyes. She did not know why, she only knew that the painting was beautiful, and that the man beside her was holding her hand, and that somewhere, somehow, love was real. "Come on," she said softly. "Let us go home." "Home," he agreed. They walked out of the gallery, into the evening air. The street was quiet, lined with trees and small shops. In the distance, a dog barked. Somewhere, roses bloomed, and in a garden beyond time, Eleanor and I watched them go. We smiled. We held hands. We turned back to our canvas, to our endless painting, to our eternal love. "Do you think they will be okay?" Eleanor asked. I thought about the young couple, walking hand in hand toward their future. I thought about all the crooked things they would face. I thought about all the quiet moments of love that would straighten them. "Yes," I said. "I think they will be just fine." "Why?" I looked at Eleanor, at the woman who had crossed a city to find me, at the woman who had waited a lifetime to love me. "Because they have each other," I said. "Because they see each other. Because they will straighten each other's crooked things." She leaned her head against my shoulder, just as she had done so many years ago in a small studio that smelled of turpentine. The stars burned overhead, the canvas waited, the garden bloomed, and love, quiet and enduring and infinite, continued. Back in the world, the young couple reached their apartment. It was small, messy, perfect. She made tea, terrible tea, and they drank it together. He picked up a sketchbook and began to draw. She watched him, her heart full. "What are you drawing?" she asked. "Us," he said simply. She came to look. On the page, two figures sat on a bench. Above them, two stars burned, cadmium red. "It is not finished," he said. Nothing ever is, she replied. That is what makes it beautiful. She kissed his forehead and went to water the plants on the windowsill, among them, a single rose bush, just beginning to bloom. She did not know where it had come from. It had appeared one day, a gift from someone. Somehow, she only knew that it was beautiful, and that it reminded her of something she could not quite name. Outside, the rain began to fall, soft, gentle, washing everything clean. The young man looked up from his sketchbook. "Do you hear that?" he asked. She listened, the rain on the windows, the distant sound of traffic, the quiet breathing of the city. "What?" she asked. That he smiled. "Nothing," he said. "Just the world starting over." She came and sat beside him, leaning against his shoulder. They watched the rain together, they listened to the sound of new beginnings, they held hands and did not speak. And somewhere, in a place beyond words, two figures sat on a bench in an endless garden. They watched the rain too, they remembered, they loved, they painted. The painting grew. It spread across the sky. It became the stars. It became the roses. It became every quiet moment of love that had ever been or ever would be. And in the corner, barely visible unless you looked closely, two small figures sat on a bench. Above them, two stars burned, cadmium red, burning together, forever, the end, but not really, because love does not end. It only changes. It only grows. It only waits to be seen. And somewhere, right now, someone is straightening a crooked photograph, someone is making terrible coffee, someone is painting a garden from memory. Someone is loving in silence, waiting to be found. Look around, look closely, look with your heart. They are there, they have always been there, they will always be there, waiting, loving, straightening the crooked things. And if you are lucky, if you are brave, if you open your eyes, you will see them, you will find them, you will love them, and the painting will continue, forever and ever. Amen. The gallery still stands on that quiet, tree-lined street. The sign above the door reads, "The Crooked Photograph," in simple gold letters. That if you visit, you will see the mural on the back wall, you will see the garden scene, the roses, the bench, you will see the two stars burning in the corner. The young artist who inherited our house now runs the gallery. Her name is Maria. She is old now, her hair as gray as mine became, her hands as stained with paint as my own used to be. She sits on the porch of our old house every evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Her quiet man, the one who fixed the broken step, passed away last spring. She misses him every day, but she is not alone. Every morning, she walks through the garden and tends the roses. Every afternoon, she goes to the gallery and talks to young artists. Every evening, she sits on the porch and remembers. And every night, before she sleeps, she walks through the house and straightens the photographs, every single one. She does not know why she does this. It is just a habit now. A ritual. A small act of love that no one sees. One day, a young woman came to the gallery. She was lost, she said, her heart was broken, she did not believe in love anymore. Maria listened to her story. She made tea, terrible tea, just as Eleanor used to make. She sat with the young woman and did not interrupt. When the young woman finished crying, Maria took her hand. "Come with me," she said. She led her to the back wall, to the mural. She pointed to the corner, to the two stars. "Do you know what this is?" Maria asked. The young woman shook her head. "This is a love story," Maria said. "It is the story of a man who was hired to be a husband and became a home. It is the story of a woman who was blind for 5 years and then finally SAW. It is the story of two people who straightened each other's crooked things." She told the young woman everything. She told her about the contract and the penthouse. She told her about the tube of red paint and the desperate search. She told her about the gallery and the studio and the terrible coffee. She told her about the letter from a dying father and the trust that built a future. The young woman listened, her tears dried, her heart, so recently broken, began to mend. "How did they do it?" she whispered. "How did they love so deeply?" Maria smiled. "They did not try to love deeply, they simply tried to love truly. They showed up every day, they paid attention, they straightened the crooked things without needing anyone to notice." She paused and looked at the mural. "They waited, they were patient, they understood that love is not a feeling. It is a choice. It is 1,000 small choices, made every day, for years and years." The young woman visited the gallery many times after that. She came to look at the mural, she came to talk to Maria, she came to learn. One day, she brought a young man with her. He was quiet, shy, with kind eyes and paint-stained hands. That he looked at the mural for a long time, then he looked at the young woman. "I see it," he said softly. "See what?" she asked. "The two stars," he said. "They are burning together, they are not alone." The young woman looked at him. She saw something in his eyes that she had never noticed before: patience, kindness, a willingness to wait. "Do you want to see the garden?" Maria asked them. She led them to the house, to the roses, to the bench where Eleanor and I had sat so many times. The young man noticed a loose step on the path. Without a word, he knelt and fixed it, and no one asked him to. No one thanked him. He simply straightened something crooked because it needed straightening. The young woman watched him, and in that moment, she understood. She understood everything Maria had tried to teach her. Love was not about grand gestures. It was about the quiet moments, the unfixed steps, the crooked photographs, the patient waiting. Years passed, the young woman and the quiet man married. They lived in a small apartment at first, then in a house with a garden. They planted roses, they painted pictures, they made terrible coffee, they visited Maria often, they sat on the porch and watched the sunset. They talked about Eleanor and Eli as if they were old friends, as if they had known them personally. In a way, they knew them through the stories, they knew them through the mural, they knew them through the house that still hummed with the memory of love. When Maria died, she left everything to them: the gallery, the house, the garden, the responsibility of telling the story. They accepted it gratefully. They understood what they had been given, not just property and money, but a legacy, a purpose, a way of living. One day, a young woman came to the gallery. She was lost, she said. Her heart was broken. She did not believe in love anymore. Maria listened to her story. She made tea, terrible tea, just as Eleanor used to make. She sat with the young woman and did not interrupt. When the young woman finished crying, Maria took her hand. "Come with me," she said. She led her to the back wall, to the mural. She pointed to the corner, to the two stars. "Do you know what this is?" Maria asked. The young woman shook her head. "This is a love story," Maria said. "It is the story of a man who was hired to be a husband and became a home. It is the story of a woman who was blind for 5 years and then finally SAW. It is the story of two people who straightened each other's crooked things." She told the young woman everything. She told her about the contract and the penthouse. She told her about the tube of red paint and the desperate search. She told her about the gallery and the studio and the terrible coffee. She told her about the letter from a dying father and the trust that built a future. The young woman listened. Her tears dried. Her heart, so recently broken, began to mend. "How did they do it?" she whispered. "How did they love so deeply?" Maria smiled. "They did not try to love deeply. They simply tried to love truly. They showed up every day, they paid attention, they straightened the crooked things without needing anyone to notice." She paused and looked at the mural. "They waited, they were patient, they understood that love is not a feeling. It is a choice. It is 1,000 small choices, made every day, for years and years." The young woman visited the gallery many times after that. She came to look at the mural, she came to talk to Maria. She came to learn. One day, she brought a young man with her. He was quiet, shy, with kind eyes and paint-stained hands. He looked at the mural for a long time, then he looked at the young woman. "I see it," he said softly. "See what?" she asked. "The two stars," he said. "They are burning together, they are not alone." The young woman looked at him. She saw something in his eyes that she had never noticed before: patience, kindness, a willingness to wait. "Do you want to see the garden?" Maria asked them. She led them to the house, to the roses, to the bench where Eleanor and I had sat so many times. The young man noticed a loose step on the path. Without a word, he knelt and fixed it, and no one asked him to. No one thanked him. He simply straightened something crooked because it needed straightening. The young woman watched him, and in that moment, she understood. She understood everything Maria had tried to teach her. Love was not about grand gestures. It was about the quiet moments, the unfixed steps, the crooked photographs, the patient waiting. Years passed, the young woman and the quiet man married. They lived in a small apartment at first, then in a house with a garden. They planted roses, they painted pictures, they made terrible coffee, they visited Maria often, they sat on the porch and watched the sunset. They talked about Eleanor and Eli as if they were old friends, as if they had known them personally. In a way, they knew them through the stories, they knew them through the mural. They knew them through the house that still hummed with the memory of love. When Maria died, she left everything to them, the gallery, the house, the garden, the responsibility of telling the story. They accepted it gratefully. They understood what they had been given, not just property and money, but a legacy. A purpose. A way of living. On the night before their wedding, the young woman and the quiet man sat in the garden. The roses were in full bloom, the stars were beginning to appear. They held hands and did not speak. Finally, the young woman broke the silence. "I am scared," she admitted. "I am scared I will fail. I am scared I will not love you well enough. I am scared we will become like so many others, growing apart, forgetting, losing our way." The quiet man turned to her. His eyes were kind, patient, full of the same quiet love I had once felt for Eleanor. "Do you know what I learned from their story?" he asked. She shook her head. "I learned that love is not about never failing. That it is about always coming back. That it is about staying even when it is hard. That it is about straightening the crooked things, over and over, for a lifetime. That we will have hard days. That we will have moments of doubt. That we will hurt each other without meaning to, but if we choose, every day, to come back to each other, we will be okay." She looked at him, this quiet man who fixed broken steps without being asked. "How did you get so wise?" she whispered. He smiled. "I listened. That I watched. That I learned from people who loved well." They were married in the garden the next day. The roses were witnesses, the stars were blessings. The mural, in the gallery down the street, glowed with the light of 2 cadmium-red stars. Years became decades, the gallery thrived, the house grew old and beautiful, the garden expanded, roses climbing everywhere, spilling over fences, filling the air with their scent. They had children. 2 of them. A boy and a girl. They told them the story every night before bed. They showed them the mural. They taught them to straighten crooked things without needing thanks. The boy became an artist. That he painted gardens and stars and 2 figures on a bench. His paintings hung in galleries across the country. People asked him where his inspiration came from. That he always told them the same thing. "Love," he would say. "Patient, quiet, enduring love." The girl became a teacher. She taught her students about art and history and the importance of paying attention. She taught them that the smallest acts of kindness matter. She taught them to notice the crooked things and straighten them. On the last day of every school year, she told them the story of Eleanor and Eli. Some of her students cried, some of them laughed, all of them remembered. The quiet man grew old. His hands, once so skilled at fixing broken things, grew stiff and tired. His eyes, once so keen at noticing what others missed, grew cloudy with age, but his heart, his quiet, patient heart, remained exactly the same. On his last night, he lay in bed with his wife beside him. The window was open, and the scent of roses filled the room. He could hear the faint sound of the city in the distance, the same sound Eleanor and I had heard so many years ago. "I am going soon," he whispered. His wife held his hand tighter. "Do not go," she said. "I have to, but I am not afraid." "Why?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "Because I know what comes next. There is a garden, there is a bench, there are 2 people waiting for me. They have been waiting for a long time." He closed his eyes. He took a final breath, and then he was gone. His wife sat with him for a long time, holding his hand. She did not cry anymore. She was too full of gratitude for the life they had shared. She kissed his forehead and walked outside, into the garden. The roses were blooming, as they always did. The stars were beginning to appear. She sat on the bench, their bench, and looked up at the sky. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for sending him to me. Thank you for teaching us how to love. Thank you for showing us that it is possible." And somewhere, in a garden beyond time, 2 figures sat on a bench and watched her. They held hands, they smiled, they remembered. Eleanor turned to me. "She understands," she said. "She finally understands." I nodded. "They all do, eventually. That is the gift, that is the legacy." The next morning, the daughter found her mother in the garden, still sitting on the bench. She had fallen asleep there, wrapped in her husband's coat. The roses surrounded her, the morning light touched her face. "Is she okay?" the son asked, coming up behind his sister. The sister nodded. "She will be. We will help her. That is what we do, that is what we learned." They helped their mother inside. They made her tea, terrible tea, just as it had always been made. They sat with her and did not try to fix anything. They simply stayed, they simply loved, they simply straightened the crooked things. The years passed. The daughter ran the gallery, the son painted his pictures, the mother grew old in the house surrounded by roses, visitors came from all over the world, drawn by the story, drawn by the mural, drawn by the hope that love like that might still exist. They would sit in the garden and talk to the old woman, they would ask her questions, they would take photographs, they would leave with something they had not arrived with, hope, belief. A willingness to wait. One day, a journalist came to write a story about the gallery and the house and the legend of Eleanor and Eli. She interviewed the old woman for hours, she walked through the garden, she studied the mural. She asked the question everyone always asked. What is the moral of this story? What are we supposed to learn from it all? The old woman thought for a long time, she looked at the roses, she looked at the sky, she thought about her quiet husband, gone now for many years, she thought about Eleanor and Eli, two people she had never met but knew better than almost anyone. Finally, she spoke. The moral is simple, love is not about grand gestures. It is not about perfect moments. It is not about finding someone who completes you, love is about showing up, every day, even when it is hard, even when you are tired, even when you would rather be alone. Love is about paying attention, noticing the small things, the crooked photographs, the broken steps, the quiet tears. Love is about staying. Not because you have to, not because of a contract, but because you choose to. Every single day, you choose to. Love is about waiting, being patient, trusting that what is real will eventually be seen, trusting that what is true will eventually be recognized. Love is about straightening the crooked things, not for thanks, not for recognition, but because they need straightening, because that is what love does. And love is about understanding that we are all broken, that we are all crooked, that we are all a little bit lost, but when someone sees us, really sees us, and stays anyway, that is when the healing begins. That is the story of Eleanor and Eli, that is the story of my husband and me, that is the story of everyone who has ever loved and been loved in return. That we are all just people, trying our best, failing often, getting up again, and if we are lucky, we find someone who walks beside us, someone who holds our hand in the dark, someone who straightens our crooked things without being asked. That is love, that is everything. That is what lasts forever. The journalist wrote her article. It was published in newspapers across the country, people read it and cried, people read it and hoped, people read it and decided to try again. The gallery received more visitors than ever, the garden became a place of pilgrimage, couples came to sit on the bench, young people came to look at the mural, old people came to remember their own loves, their own stories, their own crooked things straightened, and somewhere, in a garden beyond time, Eleanor and I watched it. All. We watched the visitors come and go. We watched the roses bloom and fade and bloom again. We watched love continue, generation after generation, never ending, always growing. Look, Eleanor said softly. I looked. A young couple sat on the bench in the garden below, they were holding hands, they were not speaking, they were simply present, simply together, simply loving. Above them, in the sky, two stars burned bright, cadmium red, burning together, forever. Do you think they know? Eleanor asked. Know what? That they are part of the story now, that they are continuing what we started, that love never really ends. I thought about it. I thought about all the years, all the moments, all the quiet acts of love. I thought about the contract and the penthouse and the tube of red paint. I thought about the gallery and the studio and the terrible coffee. I thought about Maria and her quiet man. I thought about their children and their children's children. I thought about the young couple on the bench, just beginning their own journey. They know, I said finally. They know because they feel it, they know because love is not something you learn from a story. It is something you recognize in your own heart. It is something you live, every day, in 1,000 small ways. Eleanor smiled, she leaned her head against my shoulder, the garden stretched before us, endless and beautiful, the roses bloomed in colors we had never seen in life, the light was warm and golden and eternal. I am glad we waited, she said. I am glad we found each other. I am glad you came looking for me. I am glad you left that tube of paint behind. I laughed, the same laugh I had laughed in the gallery so many years ago. That was an accident, you know. I did not plan it. She kissed my cheek. There are no accidents, only love, finding its way home. So, dear listener, dear reader, dear seeker of happy endings, this is the truth. Love is not found in grand gestures or perfect moments, love is found in the small things, the crooked photographs straightened, the broken steps fixed, the terrible coffee made with love, the patient waiting, the quiet staying, the choice, made every single day, to love anyway, you do not need a contract, you do not need a penthouse. You do not need a trust fund or a gallery or a garden full of roses, you only need a heart. Willing to be patient, you only need eyes willing to see, you only need hands willing to straighten the crooked things, and if you are lucky, if you are brave, if you open your heart, you will find someone who does the same for you, someone who notices when you are struggling, someone who stays when it would be easier to leave, someone who loves you not despite your crookedness, but because of it. That is the happy ending, not perfection, not ease. Not a life without struggle, but a life with someone beside you, someone who holds your hand in the dark, someone who straightens your crooked things, someone who chooses you, every day, for all the days of your life, and when your days end, as all days must. That love does not die that it continues that I and the memories of those who knew you that I and the stories told by those who loved you that I and the hearts of those who learned from you that it becomes a garden that it becomes a mural that it becomes two stars, burning together, forever, cadmium red, the color of love, the color of waiting, the color of home. The young couple on the bench stood up, they walked hand in hand toward the house, toward their future, toward all the crooked things waiting to be straightened. The roses nodded in the evening breeze, the stars began to appear, one by one above them, brighter than the rest, two stars burned, cadmium red, burning together, forever, and somewhere, in a garden beyond time, two figures sat on a bench and watched them go. They held hands, they smiled, they were home, the end, but remember, love does not end that it only changes that it only grows that it only waits to be seen that so look around you, look closely, look with your heart, straighten the crooked things, fix the broken steps, make the terrible coffee, wait patiently, love truly, and when you find someone who sees you, really sees you, hold on tight, hold on forever, hold on with all the quiet, patient, enduring love you have. Because that is the moral, that is the lesson, that is what lasts forever, love, simple, quiet, endless, love. Thank you for listening to this heartfelt story. If it moved you, share it, comment below, and let someone know you are never alone.